So this week on the Any Given One Day podcast, we have a chartered physiotherapist and Pilates instructor with a PhD in human movement, but he also has the running credentials to back it up. A sub 4 minute miler, sub 14 minute 5K, a sub 30 minute 10K runner, and the current European O35 3,000 meter champion, and has represented Ireland from 800 meters to 8 to 10K. Eoin Everard, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given One Day podcast. How are you getting on?
Seán, how are you? Thanks so much. Yeah, really like the hype man I have there now. That's great.
Oh, I have this as I'm reading that there. I had to I definitely have this right. A sub 4 minute miler. They have knighted people in the country across us for stuff like this. When, how, why? I know you've got a ton of info for our listeners in terms of physio and everything else, but selfishly, 4 minute miler, how? What happened here?
Yeah, well, I was always decent at running, and God, you know what? It's like nearly 11 years ago. You feel the same age, and then it's like when you look back, and it's like, I can't believe it's that long ago. But it was something I always had in my mind to try do. And in 2012, I ran 4:00.6. And I was like, and the thing with miles now, right? It's all 1,500 meters. So it's not like if you miss it this week, we'll just do them one that's next week. There's not that many races. So like I've probably ran maybe 10 or 15 like 1,500 equivalents of sub 4 minutes. But like the Morton Mile in Dublin is about the only chance you get. There's none in Europe or anything like that. And you might potentially have to go. So missed it out that year, but then trained like a demon again the following year, and just a perfect night in Santry, like one of those, we get them every so often. Like it's a nice day here in Ireland today, that like, and sun's coming down, bit of heat off the track, and I just remember on the last lap feeling really good, because there was one in Cork and I got to 200 meters left and I blew a gasket. I was like, I'm still down there running trying to finish it off. But and I blew a gasket. But the only thing is, after I ran in Cork, I kind of was like, right, I can do it. Like, I was like, even though I had ran like, maybe a 4:04, 4:05 because the last 200, and then just got it right on that day. And all my friends were around. We went out on a really good session, and it was just absolutely brilliant. It's good to have your friends around, and they knew how much I was enjoying it. So yeah, it was
fast.
Like, you're sorry, go on.
Still having that 0.06 like that, like how do you go from that to
you're super happy but also really frustrated. It happened to me before I ran like sub 14. I ran 14.00.12, and like, again, it was a big PB, and at that stage I was older, so I was like, I don't know if I'll get another chance in a race. And you start analyzing everything. You're like, especially in that 14.00.12, the week before that, like with runners, I had overly like gritted on the last 100 and like just tied up completely and gone way slower. So I was like, all right, the next race I'm going to do, I'm just going to try stay relaxed on the last 100, which I did. And then I just barely missed it. I was like, are you like cursing this?
Yeah, work away.
I was like, you son of a bitch, you should have just gritted your teeth. I was like, at least if you went backwards, at least you'd feel like you did it. But so it's a mix. You're like happy, but also like, oh God, that's just so frustrating. So yeah, it's a relief when you do it then.
What changed? I can't imagine looking at a training plan going, like, I need to focus on, like, if we're talking about marathon runs, stuff like that, you can kind of tell, okay, the 35K, I hadn't got the endurance in me, or whatever it is, I need to work more on speed, whatever it is. But for 0.06, how do you look at that? And because you're so close, like, it is elite.
Yeah.
Like, to make those small, like, what change did you make for that?
Not much. Like, you just go back, a lot of times what people have to realize is, if you're on the right lines, it's nearly doing the exact same training, not even trying to push it on. And you feel like that was my first year with my coach. I knew it was the right type of training, but everything is slightly new. The training is harder. So the key was not to try like push the training on. The key was actually to do the training at roughly the same pace, but nearly feel a bit more relaxed, feel a bit more comfortable in it, and then let it come. The other big myth like, I call it nearly the David Goggins myth, is that like, you know, this idea that like, oh, the day you run well, you grit your teeth. That isn't how it is. We have these like, oh, you know, I dug in. The day you run a PB, the day you run your best, it feels so easy. You're just relaxed. You get even for the long races, you get halfway and you cannot believe you're through halfway in that time. And I'm not saying you don't have to dig in, you do, but it's not this thing of like, I gritted my teeth from the first minute. It's like, it's not that. It's not that. And that gets, and what you said, Seán, is so knowledgeable. And I just want to highlight it again. It's like, what happened in like with a marathon, it's like at 35K, maybe you weren't fit enough. How too many people do not look at the physical fitness as the reason. And instead they go, oh my God, I just gave up at 35K. You give up at 35K because you were busting yourself to get to that point. You know, like, and that's what people, it is looking at the training. And then if you're on the right lines, even though you don't hit it, it's like having the confidence that like, look, with consistency, with doing these things, it will come. And that's the way it was. Because my wife was always like, she's not into running. And, but she's always supportive. So after races, you know, I'd be like, especially in the 1500, because you're going, you know, we're doing like you're doing like 225 a K, but you're trying to stay as relaxed as you can, you know. So sometimes it's like you go out and you're just, something happens and you're just like, even though it's early in the race, you're like, I need to get relaxed here and not feel like I'm sprinting. And I was saying to my wife, and she'd be like, yeah, but would you not then like just like dig in at the end, you know, kind of not really knowing? And I'm like, Jer, at top level running, a 1500 or a mile, it's more like playing the piano than it is this gritting. It's like a pianist doesn't say, I just need to hit the keys harder. It's like, you got to get into a flow. You got to get relaxed in a race. And I'd say that's something that people need to think. Sometimes we're like, it's all this David Goggins, no offense to the dude, but it's this thing that's actually not true. This, you dig in deep. A lot of times it's like, you need to relax. You need to let this run come to you. Take the first half easier, build through it and get confidence and feel like, oh my God, I feel good. And then naturally you push on. Sorry, I absolutely waffle. I have one more thing. If
no, you're good. Yeah, work away, work away.
All right. I did tell the guys beforehand, it's like, just cut me off if I get bored. And they underestimated it. I think they're like, no, he won't. He'll take a breath. He'll take a breath. I won't. Last thing, right, was for that mental strength thing. I think it's just a load of bollocks, basically. Like, I had a year where I was running crap, and my coach was like, look, you're fit. It's like, it's just in your head, you're mentally, you know. And I was doing everything. I was going to sports psychologists. I was going to, you know, writing like the times I wanted to run on my shoes for positive affirmation, in like looking at the mirror and like, you can do this, you are strong, all these stupid things, and just blowing up in races. And then the next year I was going, a new coach, I was going to a race, and on the way down, I was doing my master's in physio, and like the coach then was like, why haven't you ran a PB in 4 years? And I like that was the positive talk we were having. And I was like, dude, I do not know. It's like, just go out in the beer a lot or you're injured. It's like, no, just I don't know why. And like, so, but in the race, no confidence beforehand, but in the race, just running. And then like, with like maybe 2-3, like 400 left, I was like, God, I'm feeling all right, and move up a little bit. Then I'm like at 200, I'm like, you still feel good, you push. So a lot of times people think at the start of the race, oh, I gotta push, especially in the longer races. You gotta be relaxed. You gotta go through, say if it's a 5K, that first K feeling good, and then like holding your pace and then picking up, because your body will naturally, like, it will naturally do what it'll do. If you have it in you, you will just keep going past people and keep picking it up, and it'll actually feel better, rather than having to think in your head that this is a grind. And that was a good example, because I had no confidence. So if it was actually like mentally you need to be strong, I would have just like left. But it's like subconscious just takes over. It's very primal running.
That's a good thing, I suppose, about the mental side. Okay, some are using sports psychologists when you're in kind of team sports, pressure situation, the final penalty kick, a lot of that can come down to mental or bottle or whatever it comes. But if you said in running, it's a symphony. It's training. It's all the work you've put in, and then you just have to kind of trust that process. And I suppose from a mental perspective, that 0.06 and then saying we're onto something, just keep doing it and it'll happen. It's the confidence, as you've said, like if we stick at this training with the new coach, with the new processes, and I know I get there and I start training there and it feels easier to me, then the race day in essence is going to do what you said. It's going to feel comfortable until that last 200 meters, maybe, that you have that confidence to push on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, and like I'm not actually a big goal setter. Obviously, I had one that I wanted to run sub 4, but I'm more like just set habits. You just have to do the right things, and like, it'll come. Like, there's a line in Les Mis, there's a song, and it's like, one day more we'll discover what does God in heaven has in store. Or I think in like kind of Arab culture they call it maktub. Oh no, Indian maktub, and it's like, it is written. And I really believe that. I'm like, how you're going to run is how you're going to run. You just, like, you might feel good on a day, you might feel bad on a day, and all you can do is get things in line to prepare you for it. Because I've had loads of times where it's like, this should go well, maybe it doesn't that day, and then it's like, this should go well, and more often than it is going well, just because, like as Seán said at the start, it's like, if the training has gone well, it will run well. A lot of times if you're having poor performances time on time, it's like there's something in the training that's not going right. Either the training itself isn't good, or you maybe have an underlying illness, or you had COVID a while ago, and we just dismiss these things, but they're a big, big factor.
You have obviously a ton of running credentials, you just said there, and even listening to the last 5 minutes, you're very passionate about the mental side of things, the coaching, the training. You've certain things you seem to be big on.
Sorry, I'm passionate about the mental side of things, that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, but it doesn't, like, I understand that as well. Like, in terms, like, just when Eric said penalty shootout, it's like, you ever play, like, if you have like 3 penalties against you, you miss the first one, you don't care about the other 2, and you're naturally going to bury them because you're just like, you're so relaxed into it, and that's what kind of reminded me of that. But yet, all that, you sound like you were on a path to be like a running coach, and then you're like into physio and stuff like that. Where did that change for you? What or was it? Did you get injured a lot when you were younger, and you went down the physio side, or no?
Yeah, I was never a running coach. It's only actually, it's great now that running coaching is a thing. I always was like, just as a runner at a good level, you're into physios and then you kind of like it. And so I was always going down that road, and I was a good runner. So they kind of always worked hand in hand. And I'm just very kind of analytical anyway. I like to kind of, my old coach used to say it's the best and worst thing about you. You kind of overthink races, but then you are thinking about things a lot. So it was always just kind of the goal to be a physio. I think, just on a tangent, it is fantastic for people. Look, I don't coach anyone individually or anything. We have our sports Pilates, but I think it's great if people have their coaches. Like, too many people are like, oh, that's for a sports person, but having a coach can make such a difference to you. And like, there's no difference in the effort. There's no difference in the effort that you're putting in, really, or at the time. And a lot of times you're having to take time off work or time with families and stuff like that if people are amateur. And the other thing, Steve Cram talked about this, right? They were looking over his world record for the 1500. BBC, they do class, on days, they do class kind of clips, and they're talking about how it was, and he's talking about the day. And in the end, it was like, God, like, you must have felt unbelievable when you broke that world record. And he goes, yeah. And he pauses and he's like, but it was also great to break 4 minutes for 1500 when I was younger. And that really resonated in terms of, people think like, okay, breaking the 4 minutes was unbelievable, or winning All Irelands was unbelievable, but also was like, there is really the differentials on the buzz that someone gets breaking 20 minutes for the first time when they put a lot of effort in is no different than the buzz someone gets when they're going better. So I think people deserve it to themselves to put, like, they nearly feel like they're not worthy. They can afford it, but they're like, oh, like a lactic test, for example, costs about 100 quid. And many people, oh no, that'll be for elite. It's like, you can afford 100 quid. Get it, and it'll make your training better. You can afford a coach. I get it. It's probably the only thing. If you're into running, you're probably not into going out or spending a lot of money on other things. It's like, do it. You will be buzzing when you break, when you run a PB, if it's running sub 23 minutes for 5K. You'll get the same buzz as lads get when they're breaking 14 minutes.
100%.
That's the beauty about running and all of these sports. And I suppose why the podcast is doing so well is because every pace has a place. And that's what it for everyone. It's like, and that's what it is all about in terms of a marathon or in terms of a 5K. Like myself and Seán started out on the journey of, can we break 20 minutes? And that was the be all end all of and as soon as we did it, we swore we'd never go back ever again.
As soon as he did it.
But it is something for people, and we hear every week going, I'm not a runner. I was like, hold on, you've been running 4 days a week for the last 6 months. What do you mean you're not a runner? Or
100%.
I have imposter syndrome. I've trained for 16 weeks for a marathon. I was like 1% of the world have completed a marathon. You are something. You are a runner. You've given commitment to something. The same as someone going playing football with their team. They're a footballer. They play football. They play hurling. They play rugby. You're a runner. And like that, they get in coaches, they get in nutrition talks, but because they're part of a club or a GAA, normal. And we can treat our young athletes that way. And because it's an individual sport, you probably feel like, well, I shouldn't. And part of what we talked about before getting you on was me going to treat myself to an NCT with a physio and a therapist and saying, I know I'm carrying issues and I've avoided them, but I want to do this right. And I spent money on me being able to run and cycle and swim. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think people need to, if they're going to be looking at these things, take it serious for themselves.
That's exactly, Eric, you said that so well, like that, and getting that treatment and doing things correctly for yourself. And it's just the thing of like, oh, well, that wouldn't apply to me. It's like I said, if you're training 4 times a week, yes, it does apply to you. Think of like a club GA team that you'd be like, oh yeah, they're serious. They're training 3 times a week, a lot of them.
Go ahead, putting it.
Yeah, and then that's the bit that when people say to me, I'm not a runner, I'm like, you're more impressive than the likes of me, or you taking on your first 10K is far more impressive than someone doing their 10th. And that motivation and to get into something and
I won't go that far now. Come on. They could be. I'm not having that. Put effort in. If you're breaking 60 minutes for 10K, I'm for you, but you're not doing better than I'm doing. I'm not going to lie to people here, Eric.
I know. To be fair, when people,
I know. Look, but it is a big step. Yeah, it is a big step.
When they take on,
I'm only having the crack there.
When they take on an individual sport, it's impressive, to take that first step. But if they stagnate, it's no longer impressive. It should always be okay, you've tried it, you've sampled it, what next? And that's the beauty about running. It's always what's next, and I'd say that's probably a little bit frustrating for you when you go sub 4 minutes. Well, for the mile,
there is a bit of that, there is a bit of that. Like even now, it's like I did that, and then it's like I said I go up the distances, and then it was like, breaking 14 was like I broke 8 minutes for 3K and then 14 for 5K, and that was a big one. I didn't know if I'd do that, and then I broke 30 for 10K, and there is a little bit of like, okay, what do you do now? But and I'm actually still in that kind of like I'm still enjoying the running with the guys and stuff like that. But there is sometimes that you kind of you're like you're done now, because even when I did that, I broke 30, and like my coach was like, yeah, we can go a bit quicker, and there's another race on somewhere, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm doing another 10K. It's done now.
So you're still running, obviously, very high level, well into your 30s, and people listening to this, a lot of people will come from different sports. You mentioned like soccer and stuff like that, and they're in their 30s. From our demographic, we see on the Spotify stuff that they're roughly 30s, 40s, and I'd assume a lot of them would have played team sports and stuff when they're younger, and now they're getting into running. What kind of mistakes do you think people make in that transition from team sports to running in terms of not looking after their body and their training?
Yeah, there's a couple of things they do. The first, as I said, kind of alluded to it there. We do like in our sports Pilates, I'll do a cheeky plug. We have like sample running trainings, but having like a plan, a lot of them are just doing the same run the whole time. And there's this thing called the general adaptation syndrome. So basically, like when you train, you stress your body, and then the body doesn't like to be stressed. It doesn't like to be fatigued. So what it does is when it recovers, it goes, you know what, I give them like an extra bit of capacity. So if he tries to do that again, it's not going to stress me out as much. Now, so that's fine. And that will get, you know, so you'll be doing this run and you'll get like big improvements initially, but people then just continue to do the run and they're going to plateau. And the second thing is they're training too hard. So they're doing this run, but a lot of them, it's like they're doing 5K or 10K. Basically, it's like a race nearly each time. They're either going out and they're like, I pick it up and then have to dig in deep and like that, no proper, and it's just a lack of knowledge. Like no proper runner does that. When I was doing my master's, as I said, the other 3 people I was living with were getting ready for a 10K. And I wasn't paying much attention to them. They'd go out for a run. I'm like, oh, fair play. And I'd be doing my run. Then after a while, I was like, oh yeah, what are you doing? You're out training like 3 times a week. And they're like, oh, just go out and run it hard, 10K basically as hard as I can. I was like, oh my God. Like when I broke my 10K, that was the first time I ran 10K. You know, like it's like they don't do that. They run like, so I think in your week having like 2 workouts, so having one kind of aerobic style workout, and I'd get a lactic test to be like the one thing I'd recommend to everybody, lactic test, and then I'd do one kind of more like minutes on, minutes off, always about 90% effort, and then maybe one longer run or just a couple of easy runs. So I think they're lacking that structure, and that's the main one. And then as we get older, something like a sports Pilates or a gym, something just to keep the body healthy, because all running injuries are passive injuries. Like they're all like Achilles tendonitis, like sometimes you can get calf pain. I can come back to that in a second, but like shin splints, knee pain, hip pain, they're all overloads of passive structures, because running is really good for burning calories, but it's not good for really using muscles. You kind of like you're landing and it's the passive, it's the tendons, it's the ligaments, it's the joints that are basically taking that slap of the ground and moving on. So you need something in your week that's kind of switching on the muscles. And if the muscles are switched on, they will naturally absorb the load. But if you're not doing something in the week to kind of innervate them, it's like I use this analogy a lot. Like if you're on your own, Seán, in the pub and someone like starts a fight on you, you're on your own. If Eric is sleeping or he's away, he's not there to help you. If he's been woken up, he's beside you.
Sounds like me, all right.
You're just hiding out the back, you know. But if he's beside you, he's naturally going to help you, and that's the way with the thing. So I think people who were in other sports, especially like anyone really, but they're used to games which has much more sprinting, so the muscles are naturally on. So even the tendons and ligaments aren't conditioned to take that load. They then just start doing the same type of training all week, you know, with no variation in it. And they don't do something else to kind of like activate the muscles, like a sports Pilates or like a gym or even like a yoga, just something to like restore the body. So having a structured plan and then having something in the week, I think is the big thing to do as you're running in your 30s, 40s or 50s and beyond.
What is your, what's the difference between Pilates and sports Pilates?
The difference between Pilates and sports Pilates basically is Pilates works a lot on like ground-based exercises, really like activating those muscles, like focusing on core and glutes. And we do that. But what we then do is transfer that into standing and transfer that into like positions that will mimic running much more. So because I'm a runner, I would have done like my Pilates training or through physio and gone like, this is good, but you need now to like doing things on the ground is fine. It's good because you need to switch on those muscles. But when those muscles are switched on, you need to, I have a transitions class. So we do different things each week, but one is a transition. So going from the ground into all fours, into standing and teaching how to switch that muscle on. Like I had a guy, he was going to a well-known like sports medicine place, and it was like 4 months of the exact same training. And like, he still had hip pain. And he was like, oh, like, they were like, oh, we're doing our muscle strengthening here of like, you know, he's like, so your glute med on the outside is really strong. You shouldn't have pain. But I was like, you're just on the ground doing that, man. You need to stand. And he still had like a hip drop. So it's like, okay, but we need to take the strength from the ground here now and get you standing and working on like putting that back in. Because now you know how to switch on the muscle, but now you need to like get the motor control, get the patterning that's going to be similar into running. So that's the main thing.
It's a huge one now. I've seen through my own experience with this, that like Seán said to me, what was wrong? And I was like, Seán, what was right? And it comes down to what you said. I neglected kind of the strength work. It was just, can I run? Can I swim? Can I cycle?
Yeah.
Would I stretch afterwards? We won't agree or disagree on whether stretching happened or not. But it's something that has really hit home with me in the start of this year and as a build towards goals towards the end of the year. Is that strength has to be a big part of my training. I'm doing a lot of stuff where I'm balancing on one leg and transitioning to different positions. And I have noticed a huge difference. Even though my cardiovascular fitness is coming along, it's not where I am. I feel comfortable running. Although I know my heart and my lungs aren't working well, the body is working well, which has probably been the biggest positive impact to this whole thing that I've done. And it's hearing it again from yourself is kind of reaffirming that I'm on the right path. And people do really need to take it serious if they want longevity in this.
Yeah, and it's a longevity, as you said there, Eric. You're right. Like, look, there's a little bit on running economy. If you're stronger, you'll move a little bit smoother, like you're saying. But basically, to get better at running, you need to run. And then we use this stuff to keep you running well. Do you know, like you know, because people can get a bit too obsessed. If running is the goal, like when people come into sports Pilates, I kind of ask, like, is it general fitness or if it's or is it running? Because my goal would be like even though I'm a runner, if I was telling someone I keep it general fitness, I would probably do 3 gyms, 3 runs a day off, you know, so Pilates, a gym, and maybe yoga, and then 3 different runs. And I'm like, that's a way healthier balance. But if your goal is running, then it has to be just like sports Pilates once a week or something once a week, and then other 5 days is running, like, because that is what gets you better. But as you said, Eric, people negate that, and then if you start getting stiff or sore, if the body's not moving smoothly, you will plateau, you'll get injured. And even if you don't get injured, people know what it's like to run, like, and it feels like they have a freaking peg leg because the leg just does not move the way it should, like. So you can't build kind of fitness on a dysfunctional base.
Do you reckon that, based off what you said there, that once I suppose you have to build to a certain level, and then something like doing a sports Pilates or a gym session should be only once a week if you're all in on the running, that's enough to, as you say, switch on, activate the muscles? Do you think that's enough doing once, or do you think people should be doing 2 to 3 times a week, gym or sports Pilates? And
I do. Like, look, again, I said if it was more health and all, like, I would do it twice. But for the runners that I have, I'd say, once a week we have a 45-minute class. And then we give like little 10-minute rehab videos or like hockey ball work that you can do. So if you've got a sore knee, for example, you might do the Pilates once a week, and then the 10-minute rehab maybe once a week as well, or just do the hockey ball work watching TV. So it's like all these things I think are like thresholds. It's like you just need to get up to a threshold level of strength. Like, you know, the beginner's Pilates is actually quite tough, and people are like, what's the intermediate or the advanced? It's like, it's actually not that much harder, because once we're up at a decent level, then it's about varying the stimulus again, like what I said, where it's like, it's not about, like, once we're on the ground able to activate the muscles, it's like that's enough activation. Then it's like, okay, we'll do a few different type of things in standing, we'll add a couple little weights to distract us, just different variations. But it's not like, okay, we're doing 30, now we need to do 100. It's like once things are switched on, it's just keeping it kind of maintained then.
In terms of running injuries, one of the most popular ones, popular is probably the wrong way of putting it.
It's on my
the one everybody wants.
Yeah, well, you touched on it earlier, was the Achilles, tendonitis, that pounding of the pavement and everything else. And usually when we hear that, the first thing you would hear was, well, are you doing your calf raises or your heel drops and stuff like that? But you don't think that's the best approach?
No, it's terrible. Not terrible. Okay. Heel drops are fine if you've actually stopped running. That would be kind of the caveat I would put. Right. So what is Achilles tendonitis, basically, or tendinopathy? It's an overload, basically, of the kind of the calf and the Achilles structure. Okay, so like it's working too hard. So then our solution is, okay, we're going to strengthen it up and work it harder so it's able for that. That's like, so like say the two of you are doing the podcast, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing all the editing, Seán, you're doing everything, and Eric is just coming in last minute. Now I know you emailed me.
He knows it so well.
That's the case.
You have some of the podcast up. I'm only comic relief, really. I'm not even that.
He asked me to bring it in. He's like, right, we can talk about Pilates and injuries, but if we can just address this. But right, so if then my thing was like, okay, well, can we do stuff with Seán to make him better? It'd be like, no, Eric, man, you need to kick in here. And then if there's still an issue, then we can come to Seán. And that's the way it is with like Achilles pain, where you get it, you're still running, so it's still getting loaded, you know. So a lot of times people, we need to load it up. It's like, it's getting loaded, it's overloaded. So what I would do is, my favorite one is a single leg deadlift there and the glute bridge. So like we're standing on we're standing on one leg, we're bringing the other leg back, and we're holding that with a bent knee. So we're kind of in the exact position where the foot is going to hit the ground, in that kind of knee position. Now, it's isometric, which means it's not moving. So the Achilles and the calf is still working hard. But what's working more? It's like Eric mentioned it. The foot muscles are taking a lot of pressure. The hamstring and glutes are having to work. The core and the pelvis has to be kept in a good alignment. Now all of a sudden, and it's that idea of what we talked about with in the pub say, it's like we're waking up the other areas that are not working enough, switching them on. The body does not want to be injured. It does not want to hurt itself. It's only when if something's not innervated or not waking up, it just won't use it. If it's strong and it has that appropriate balance, it will do it, you know. So they're kind of the exercises, and say like in the Pilates, we're doing exercises like that all the time. And then the person might do a 10-minute video, which is a lot. They have that. We have them. It's like 10 minutes on the like single leg deadlift and kind of balance exercises and maybe a glute bridge. And a lot of times I find, and then I'm doing like hockey ball to release around the calf to take pressure off the Achilles, even like rolling the bottom of the foot. A lot of times 2-3 weeks they're able to run and they're back and it's way better. Only then if that hasn't worked and it's like, I'm stopped running with this, then we can look at adding heel drops, heel raises. Then we can look at like some different exercises where we're going into like, you know, still isometric, but like really working the Achilles. But until we get everything else working on the chain, we're not attacking the one thing that's being overworked.
What are other weak areas of the body? You mentioned glute med there, potentially. So
yeah, really, that's a great question.
But like,
sorry, I do some of these podcasts and that one doesn't come up.
Shit! I was like, okay, shit question. Move on.
That is a really good question.
I was actually just waiting to chime in and give Seán Doug views, but you actually think it's a good question, yeah?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, what are the weak? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so there are certain areas that seem to get like. The guy Vladimir Yanda did a thing. He did it with like, he worked a lot with like children with cerebral palsy, and what he found was that like certain muscles are prone to tightness and certain muscles are prone to weakness, and that generally is. Then he went on to work with like quote unquote normal people, like, or people didn't have that kind of dysfunction that and he found like, look, there's this similar type of thing. So there's certain muscles that are prone to like get tight, and there's certain muscles that are very heavily innervated. So like that, like the foot muscles tend to get like weak. The glute medius tend to get weak. The lower abdominals tend to get weak. And if we can correct them with that, then right, there's also this thing called the joint by joint approach, which essentially was by a guy, Gray Cook and Mike Boyle. Now this is out. Loads of people have this, but this is the nicest way I've seen it explained. Was that every joint should be either stable or mobile. So like the foot should be stable. You know, if you think about it, it's fallen arches is the issue. The ankle should be mobile. the knee is a hinge joint. It should only flex and extend. You don't want the knee buckling in and buckling out, and that's where you get issues. The hip is a ball and socket joint. It should be able to move in every direction. The lower back should be stable. Like, it shouldn't really move. And again, when we're moving excessively in the lower back, that's where we get the issues. Upper back should be mobile. You know, we don't want to be hunched all the time. And a lot of times we get a reversal of that. We're not moving well at the hips. We're not moving well at the ankle. And then in runners, you see a lot of knee pain, and you can see a little bit less back pain, but a lot of knee pain, because if you can't move at the ankle and you can't move at the hip, the only joint then that's available to move is the knee. So we end up buckling through the knee. So there are the two things I would say. You get the glutes, the lower core to kind of control the pelvic position, have a tendency to kind of get weak. The foot muscles have a tendency to get weak. And then also the ankle has a tendency to really get stiff. The hip has a tendency to get stiff. So we want to get movement better through those joints, and we want to get more stable, keeping the knee in alignment and getting the core kind of stable and not moving too much through the lower back.
Do you think the best way is movement the best medicine for these kind of things? Like if I'm listening to you now and I'm trying to get the cheat notes, is it hip mobility work and 100%. Actually doing movements in the direction and progressing them? Same with the ankle movements. Is that the best way to do it? Whereas people, I know myself, I do follow along yoga, I do everything else, but is it this element of moving and functional movement that is going to give me the biggest progression?
Right. So there's three things why you can't move correctly. So when you're talking about movement, you're talking about mobility, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's three reasons why someone can't move correctly. The first is it's a mobility issue. So like, we're designed as hunter-gatherers. So if you can't move at your ankle and your hip, you will be able to move somewhere. Like, that's the way we're designed. There's no way where you're going like, oh, I can't move through my ankle and hip, guys. I'm going to correct these before I move to my knee or my back. It's like, no, you'll just move through the knee and the back. So yeah, mobility, particularly through the ankle, hip, and upper back. If you can target, like, YouTube those exercises, 90% of people are going to be okay. The second reason someone moves poorly, like say their knee buckles in, is that one of the muscles are not activated. So they have good mobility. You see a lot in teenagers, they have really good mobility, but the muscles aren't strong. And again, that's where we said foot muscles around the hip, the pelvic control isn't great at all. So for that, then that person needs to be working, like, say, your glute bridges, working on, I said, we have the Backaware belt, where finding the middle, learning how to like engage the core to hold that steady, doing that type of work, working on the balance, keeping the knee in line. So like really burning those muscles. Like I do say it in the Pilates, where people say it's like, you know, people think it, you know, I have people, oh, I got hip pain and like, or back pain, and like my physio get me this like figure 4 stretch, and it's not work. Like I still have it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And like, you sit on your ass 10 hours a day. Like you thought a 30-second stretch was going to do what exactly? You know, like, you know, you got to get these muscles. I say in the class, we got to get these muscles burning. Like we got to get them switched on. Like it takes firing these up. And then the last reason why someone might move correctly is motor control. And that's what we were saying, the difference between traditional Pilates just being kind of more on the ground, then like getting something innovative on the ground, getting back into these positions where you're practicing the movements and just going through them, and that getting that awareness of what's a good position, what's not a good position. And if you have those three things, sometimes there's an anatomy, I'm not going to get into it, but some people are just designed in a certain way that they won't be able to like squat great, for example. But those three are modifiable and they'll fix a lot of the problems.
Most people listen to this obviously be runners. You're mentioning gym work there. How would you structure a gym session? Is there any sort of elements? Would you put a lot of like your 10-15 minutes into like glute bridges, single leg deadlift work, rubbing your foot with the ball? Or is there like certain elements you think you need for a good performance in the gym based off physio into the gym? Yeah, all right. So there's two things you need to know here, right? So there is a hierarchy of performance with the gym. So on the base of the pyramid,
And what hierarchy essentially is, don't move to the next level until you're very good at the first level. And I'm going to come in with a second thing then. I'm going to show you how I structure a gym. Bottom level is movement. Be able to do the correct movements correctly. Don't worry about loading up the movements if you can't do them with decent technique. Okay, so that's correcting the mobility, the stability, the motor control. So that's like, with that then, like sports Pilates, that type of work, you know, we use bands, we use light weights, but it's more that type of work is the thing that we're going to look at. Then the next level up is, once you're moving correctly, then you're doing what we call work capacity or anatomical adaptation. It's about adapting the body to the type of work you do. So that's like 3x10, 3x12, like doing more of the reps, 60, 70% of 1 rep max, but that type of work. So you're focused more on like 3x12s, 3x10s. And what you're trying to do is like adapt your body to strength. So being used to holding weights. For the majority of runners, as you said, if running is the goal, you're never really getting above that. You're just working on the movement being the important bit, and then you're working on maybe work capacity in the gym, because two of those are going to really innervate the muscles. But this would be for anyone in the gym. This isn't for a runner. This is like this is the best way to structure. Like I lecture down in Waterford, and this is what I hammer into my, like, you know, students who like would be more like strength and conditioning coaches. The next level then is max strength. So the thing you want to kind of build then is like horsepower in the engine. Okay, you can have the most efficient engine, but if it's only a 1 liter, it ain't going to beat like a V6. So you go max strength, which is like kind of 3x5 reps. Then you want to work on power, which can be broken into a speed, strength speed, which is like sleds, like pushing the sled fast, maybe like jumps with a weight, into like kind of more lighter jumps, like box jumps, or just like lighter sleds, med ball throws, that kind of stuff. Then you can do plyometrics, which is like kind of translating the strength into like very quickly. And then you're kind of working on speed. So in that way, then say like for a field-based athlete, you've got like good speed, but you've got then robustness and you got strength. Now, with that then, you need that in your head, like, what's my goal? But even if it's the goal, if you're into the gym, you should still have a little bit of each of those levels. So for example, if I was doing a gym and my focus was on the E block, if someone's trying to read, they're going to be like, what the hell? But anyway, look, you can take a pen out afterwards. Because this happens to me sometimes if I'm listening to a podcast, to go into real specifics. I go, I'm on my run, I'm like, I must write that down after. I never write it down, but just enjoy it. It makes sense. So you're going to have an A block, which is power, B block, which is strength, C and D, which is work capacity, and then an E block is movement. So how might that look? The E block, if that's our focus, or the D block, say work capacity. We're doing Pilates once a week. We're like, that's my good E block, and I want to focus on work capacity as the main goal in the gym. How my gym would then look is like, okay, 50% of my time is going to be on the work capacity stuff, but I'm still going to have 50% on the other stuff. So I might have a couple of warm-up exercises. I put that as E block kind of stuff. So that's my movement, just to warm up. A block would be power. So I might have it that I'm doing like sled pushes fast, you know, or I might do some like box jumps, something like in the power range there, like, you know, and then that'd be A. So I'd have A1, fast sled pushes 25 meters, 4x25. Okay. A little bit of weight, push the sled as quick as I can, grand. Or push a med ball and sprint after it, or do some kind of loaded jumps. Then I might have one strength exercise, like a 5 reps. Like, so I might have heavy enough hex bar squat, heavy enough deadlift, heavy, or single leg deadlift, heavy enough bench press, whatever you want to do. So you just have your strength exercise. So they're not going to take too long, but we're still keeping a little bit of it in. And then we might go into just a C block of like C1, 2, 3, and 4. And that might be like upper, lower, upper, lower. So I might go inverse row, so where you're underneath a bar pulling up. I might then go into like a kettlebell swing for 20. I might then go into like, I don't know, med ball push, like a push, so like a press up with a med ball. And then I might finish with I did a hinge, so I might finish with like a split squat for 12 each side, and then do 3 sets of that. So that's going to take way longer. So then at the end of the session, I've got all, if you thought the pyramid, I had I did that in warm up. If I wanted, I could do more core, and then I have a bit of power, I have a bit of strength, and then I have a lot of work capacity. And then depending on what your goal is, if you're like, okay, I'm moving well, I want to move up the pyramid, you just spend longer in, say, the B block. Then you just do, okay, I'll have more strength exercises and less of the other stuff.
And all which obviously is complementing the goal, as you're saying. And when people are setting themselves up now, so obviously we're moving into, I know back home, spring is very much in the air today. The weather,
love it.
And people are getting the itch for races and plans and signing up for all sorts. How do they best set up? Is it the likes of reaching out to you to say, okay, they've listened to this, they're enthusiastic about it, but they want to do it right this time? What's the best way to go about it? Is it finding a coach online? Is it finding you online, or what is the best method of even?
Yeah, look, everybody should just go through me and know. Look, like, what we have is we have our sports Pilates. There's a free trial of that. You can do it once a week, and we have like follow along programs for running. So like from 5, 10K, or from kind of half marathon. So you're in. It's all included that you can do it for a week, see if you enjoy it. So you get added to a group, you get the training, and like say if you're 9 weeks out from a race, we all kind of pick a race roughly, whatever, we'll have one Enfield in the end of May, or we have people in the UK and Canada, and like they'll just pick a random race close enough to that, and I give out the racing. So if you want that, that's a good start. Yeah, but like maybe even like your local coach, a plan online. It's important, yeah, because what people do, as I said, there's no kind of build. That's the biggest thing. It's like they're just going out either doing all the same run, or even if they're doing sessions, it's not building anything. Like it's that person, they're just doing that like a park run hard every week. Like that's not going to do anything. You're going to just plateau very quickly. Like if you're doing that, you'd be better off doing, like, say you just do the park run, but maybe just do the park run at 80% one week because it's like a tempo, and maybe do a little bit after it. Or next week do 1 minute on, 1 minute off in the park run, and then next week do 5 minutes hard and then take 2 minutes easy and do that in the park run. And then the 4th week, hit the park run hard and a race. And over time, you do way better. So yeah, if people want to check it out, we have everardpilates.com. You can get a free trial. We have follow along classes. But I believe that everybody should have like a coach or someone that, at least a structure that it's written down, and it's like, yeah, this is targeting this kind of race period, and then I'll take a little bit of an easy time. Like what you're doing, Eric, is so good. It's like train hard and then have a time, say for your NCT, a time to rebuild the body, and then go back. Like I love a line like, success leaves clues. Like look what elite athletes do. You don't have to be elite to do it. Like, get yourself a lactic test. They're about £100. If anyone has a lactic test, you can go with anyone. You can just email me, everardpilates@gmail.com. You do not have to take the course or anything. I'll analyze the results. I'll say, here are your 5 zones, and I'll give you 2 weeks free training, just like there. I have a sample of that. I'll mess around with them every week, and you'd have an idea.
In terms of those lactic tests, a lot of times, like when even myself, I've had the mentality of getting into triathlon or getting a swimming coach. I actually need to get better at swimming before I get a swimming coach. And it's like the lactate test. Do people, okay, we've come off the couch and we get a lactate test. Do we need to get another one in 6 months?
No.
Is that it? Is that just what you are? And people should get it to understand their own bodies.
Yeah, that's such a good question, Eric. So you're one each. I'll come into a tiebreak.
Well, I do have a purpose on this podcast after all, Seán.
I don't know what you were talking about, Seán. Lads, I've actually really enjoyed this. This has been great crack. Basically, yeah, okay. Because this is the big myth. I get this a lot. It's like, yeah, again, that thing of like, oh, I'm kind of feeling like a fraud here. I'm not in great shape. Should I wait a bit? Lactic is an internal measure. Like your heart, like I got my first lactic test at like 18, and then like at 38, at that age I was like 180 to 186 was my lactic zone. Now my lactic zone is like 179 to 183. So if I never got another one since I've been 18, the times have improved a lot. I'd be okay. Now, so why I'm saying that, it's an internal measure. Your heart is basically going to beat the exact same. You know, the lactic you produce is going to beat the same. How you perceive intensity is going to be the same. So for example, when you're unfit, say you just get off the couch. Now, look, saying that, if I just do a 0 to 5K, couch to 5K program, I wouldn't be like, I'm getting my lactic. I'll be like, you need to just get out and get running and get used to it for the first 6 months. But after, say, 6 months, if you got a spare 100 quid, I would get one done. Because what happens is, right, it's like, say that person at 6 months, if you got them, right, to run, say, a park run 5K, they run as hard as they can. If you ask them, out of 10, how hard was that race? They're going to say 10. Do you know? Or you say, run at 80%. They're like, look, I can't run at 80%. I'm actually not that fit. That's not the way it is, because that's an internal measure. Now, if they train for another 6 months and you got them to run at that same pace, they'd be like, oh, yeah, this is like a 6 out of 10. Or you said go at 10 out of 10 effort, they would then be able to go much faster. So the speed will increase, but not their internal measure of what an 8 out of 10 or what a 10 out of 10 is. So it's the same with heart rates and lactics. It's like, while your pace will increase, the heart rate that you run at that pace will always be the same. So if that person after 6 months does a park run, they run it in 30 minutes. What they'd find is, okay, your heart rate was roughly like, say, 180, it fell 10 out of 10 and you ran 30 minutes. You train then for another 6 months, you do another one, now you ran 24 minutes, but your heart rate was still 180 and it still fell 10 out of 10. If that makes sense.
It never gets any easier, you just get faster.
And the internal measures don't change. So there's no thing is, you don't need to get fitter, because your heart rate will always basically be your heart rate. The lactic you produce when you're at 10 out of 10 is irrespective of the external pace that you're running.
Do you take much stock in your VO2 max?
No, it's a load of crap.
I didn't say that.
No, because, and you see a lot. You see,
was a VO2 expert.
yeah. He's a fraud anyway. Don't get him in. I don't know who it is, but like, no, a lot of people have bought that extra. They bought the equipment super expensive. People were more like, what's great now is people are realizing like tests are only valuable. That's why you say people send me the results, because it is absolutely baffling how many people aren't able to analyze the results. Like, they don't know what to do with them. So people were like getting tests just to get the test. You know, like what you need to do is, like in our program, like I'm always telling lads, get your test, because it just makes everything so much easier. Like, so for example, right, one of the key sessions we would do would be like, shout out to Emmett Dunleavy, like, you know, it's based off his, it's like 4 by 7 minutes at zone 3, which is marathon heart rate. So marathon effort, not marathon pace. Because the day you ran your best marathon, you were tapered, you had your great shoes on, you had all the hydration. But we know off the lactics, zone 3 is, say, 149 to 154. So when I'm saying that, you just do the first one at like 149, don't go faster than 154. Just look at your heart rate. Now, what's great about that is I can do it, Seán can do it, and Eric can do it. And even though we could be at different levels of fitness, it's 7 minutes at that zone. So we're all running appropriate for our zone. I'm running, you know, a mile and a good bit, like 1.5 miles maybe. You're running, no, not 1.5 miles, like, but over a mile. You could be running, one of you could be running 1,000 meters in that time. And then the other person could be running 800 meters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but everybody, and that allows us then to have different distances, which was the thing that the load is. But we've all ran like say 28 minutes of zone 3 at our appropriate effort. So tests are only valuable when you get practical information from it. So knowing that your VO2 is 63 or I have a high VO2, it's like, well done. What the hell are you going to do with that? And the problem is a lot of people now are left with really expensive, like, so if I spend $4,000 on this VO2 max, I'm like, the amount of times I tell people get out, like even in the Pilates, oh, I'm getting a lactate test, and they come back and they've got a VO2. And it's like, that person is just frauding you, you know, because they have a VO2, you know, they're like, oh, will I add a VO2 in? It's like, no, it doesn't bother. Don't bother. It's not telling you anything.
That always comes back to the Lucas Aid Sport 33% longer ad where they had your man strapped up to the
exactly. Looks cool.
And everyone's like, that's it. That's what
you know,
makes me run faster.
that study is a load of crap as well. Like what they did was they to balance it, you weren't allowed to eat for 2.5 hours before the test. So like if one's not allowed to eat and only have water and the other person's obviously drinking calories, you're going to go longer. Do you know, like there's so many studies that are just like, because I study research, it has just gone unbelievable. Like this is, look, I don't like for example, like
back to fiction. I know you're probably got into it, but for the likes of us,
it's very tough because you need to be able to read methodologies. I think radio and people have so much more to answer for. Like I don't mean this bad, but like, because there is a homeless crisis, but like if Bernardo's go, oh, X% of homeless now or whatever, and it's like, yeah, the charity make more money if they have the fact. Like you can't, it's like me coming up with like, no one's fact checking this. It'd be like, oh yeah, like I see that 90% of injuries will be prevented with Pilates, and I get a freaking advertisement essentially on the Today FM news, and it's like, right, well, he benefits from that, and it's the same like Lucas Aid benefit from that. No one's like, well, that's mad. Like they should have done that study where someone can have their normal, like have your normal pre-race like food, like have a banana 2 hours beforehand and see what the difference is.
So the fact that we know it's 33%, like that just shows it's more marketing than anything else that we're all able to quote that, whereas we can't.
It's good, like, but it's like another one is static stretching. Oh, you don't do static stretching in a warm-up. I did a study because that study was done. People hold a 2-minute stretch, then go onto a mat and jump as high as you can. Now you've done a load of races, guys. Have you ever seen anyone 2 minutes, like we're all getting ready? It's like, what's your man doing? He's just down holding his toes for 2 minutes. You know, it's just like that. Yeah, nobody does that. But like we did a study where people did static stretching, then they did dynamic and strides. The other group did dynamic and strides. The static stretching was the exact same, and in one test they were slightly better. Do you know, it's just like, but everybody knows static stretching is bad for us because nobody can freaking read a study.
What do you see now? Because you're very active on Instagram and stuff on these lines that you're like, if I see this myth one more time, or if someone walks into my places and says this one thing to me again, I'm going to absolutely lose it, that you're seeing a lot lately?
Don't know. I don't like, sorry, like maybe the VO2s that like they're important, but I don't think people are spreading that. I do say that the only thing I will say is that I don't really discount anything either. You know, I have my views on things. Like I have my views on what works, decent bit of research, decent bit of like personal experience. But if you came up to me, Seán, or someone saying something on Instagram, most times I'm like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'll look into that. It's like, is that an actual thing? Because I feel like people are sometimes too dogmatic about like, oh, well, this is the way I do it and that's the best way. And like I said, I have this Backaware belt, which kind of gives you feedback on your back position. Now, I like a neutral spine. I like basically the idea that like learning good technique in exercises is important, and like keeping the back in like the middle rather than always having it fully rounded is a healthier position, and it's stronger But like, I'm not like, if someone else has a different opinion on that, like say if someone has good muscular control, we talked about like the passive system, if the muscles are able to control it in an end range, I can get on board with that, you know.
So someone's, it's like a Jefferson curl or something like that, or you'd be okay with that. What would be your 3-4 exercises you'd pick for just on that back pain there? Would a Jefferson curl, something like that, be one
definitely
of those?
not,
Or
definitely not 100%, because but again, I'm not, see, the thing with a Jefferson curl is it's generally like a 25-year-old doing one there, or someone who's quite muscular. Like, I have no problem with a Jefferson curl if someone has control going down. What I don't want is freaking Sally on Instagram thinking, oh yeah, that's the great one. And it's like, Sally, you don't have that control.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's like, what you need to do is the basics. But on Instagram, sometimes we're all arguing like that. Oh, is the Jefferson curl good or bad? It's like, know the audience for it. It's like, if you're just in the normal person, what I would do is like being able to find the middle. So arch your back, come all the way up, find the middle, doing like a Superman, you're bridging, single leg deadlift, that type of work, and learning like good control. And if you have good control, then you can move to the end range of things when the back is flared, like calm down. Yeah, so like Superman, I like side plank, bridge, single leg deadlift. I just like learning that like pelvic control, being able to hold that and moving. Like, I'll give you an example. My friend, I'll go for lunch with him. Like, he's a doctor, and like, it just sounds such a nice guy, but like, he's busy. He's a doctor. He's got 3 young kids. So he's running once every 2 weeks. I was like, oh, man, you got to get that up. And he was like, yeah, but okay. I was listening to like Joe Rogan, and the guy was talking about the double breath. If you go, like, would that really work for me? And I was like, dude, you run once every 2 weeks. What work for you is running more than that. And he's like, yeah, no, you're right. And then it's like later on, oh, I heard a guy who's like pose running. If I like do this, I was like, you run every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks, just run once every week. So again, we can be arguing like the minutia so much, and it's like, get these basics right, and the rest will kind of fall into place.
And it is that thing, the Instagram education now that people are getting, and it's trying to decipher, you know, like, which is better for me, this, that. Do I nasal breathe? Do I jump in an ice bath? Do I do a handstand? All of these,
yeah,
you have to contend
and it's
with.
like, yeah, and it's like, well, yeah, and your program is, well, I just go out for like 3 5Ks a week, same pace, but I'm in the ice bath on one leg, hopping up and down, and your man Huberman told me to do it. Like, he's another one. He's another one where all the studies are absolute, not all of them, but there's so much garbage. Like, I'm not joking, and I fall for these as well. Oh, you know, like, ice baths improves, say, testosterone. It's like, great. You know what the weather has been like. I came back from a run, it was lashing, freezing. I was like, okay, I get in the ice, like, get cold shower, and it's like, you need to be there 2 minutes. I'm like shivering. My hands looked dead till lunchtime. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. Look up the study, and it's like, basically the testicles need to be cooler outside the body. And I was like, this is it. All right. The same with the other, like I can't feel my hands for the last 4 hours. Like, that isn't the same thing. Same with the guy, Matthew something. He was like, oh, sleep. Like, sleep is important. I love sleep. But he's like, a study saw that people who didn't sleep well before a race, like, their VO2 dropped 15%. And of course, then, like, you know, if you can't sleep, like, trying to sleep is like trying to lose your keys. It's like, sleep, you know. And I'm there. I was like, okay, third night, I was like, I got to look this up because this is going to ruin me for forevermore. Yeah. The study was like, the people had done it in Australia, then traveled to the UK and then redone it. I'm like, okay, like, me having tossing and turning in bed is not me being on a freaking plane for like, you know, nearly 24 hours.
All the time zone changes and everything else. Yeah, get out of that.
But like, they're just giving, as you said, they're just giving like this study, and people, that's a big thing at the moment. If it sounds like this is research, people are like way more into it, but they're not able to read the studies, like, you know. So it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, a recent one I fell for was the coffee one, where you can't have coffee 90 minutes after waking up. And then there's another study seen me done recently where it's like, yeah, no, that's just not true at all. Like, because
Yeah, it's
something about
funny, like.
they have a great way of saying it's like your edacine something hasn't kicked in yet for the first 90 minutes, so you can't have coffee. Like having coffee is no use. I'm like, it lowered my coffee consumption, which I need to do just because I'm always getting the jitters and stuff like that. But like overall, in terms of waking up in the morning, nah, it didn't make much difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's like
Myself and Seán are releasing a study of how our podcast makes you run faster. 33% faster.
And on that note,
stop.
oh, and I'm conscious of taking up your time because it's been an hour in the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on. That was very, very insightful.
I love this. This absolutely flew. Like, yeah, loved it.
We'll definitely get you back on again, Eoin. And before you go, I suppose, what's next for you in terms of you, the athlete, and you, the physio? What's next? What is the goal for you?
Athlete, nothing really. I'm just going to say, you know, hopefully compete in a few road races and just enjoy the running. I'm working on this thing called the Backaware belt. It gives you kind of instant feedback on your back position. I've been working on it for like 3-4 years. It's finally coming good. I got an unbelievable app developer team. I've been around the ring, lads, with like this thing. You would not believe. Like the first time the guy was like, he's meant to ship it. I paid him loads of money. And he was like, you wouldn't believe it got robbed. And I'm not joking. The thing was the ugliest looking thing. I was like, nobody robbed that. You know, and then he just disappeared, you know. And then another guy the same. He was like, could I have my Christmas bonus early? And I'm a mug. I'm like, yeah, go on. You've been and again, just didn't go. But no, it's finally coming on really well. So we're doing trials with that. People are doing it with the Backaware, and then just doing the Pilates at everardpilates.com.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, we'll definitely check that out. We'll have that in the show notes. And that is pretty much it for this week's episode of the Any Given Day podcast from myself, Eoin, and Eric. Take care.
I better do some work.